The girl stands by the banks of the rushing river. She freezes, her foot just about to go beneath the waves. Singing. She hears singing. She's been saved. Her female relatives hide her away. They dress her in fern fronds and rub her skin with red camwood. A feast is prepared. Someone wraps a rope around her waist and leads her back to the village. She's going home. In the village, two groups play a tug-of-war over the girl until the rope around her breaks and she collapses. Her name is called 9 times in that same strange, singing language. The girl stands up as if in a trance. More weeks of rituals pass, and then she is led back to the stream where a traditional healer bathes her and her initiation ends. This is the mermaid ritual of Cameroon. Welcome back. I appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch my videos and shorts. If this is your first time here, click the like and sub buttons if you want more magical content in your life. And if you really like my content, consider giving me a Ko-Fi donation, or coffee, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It will help me do more in-depth research, enabling me to buy books, or pay for paywalled content for research purposes. Miengu, singular Jingu, are the water spirits of the Sawa people in Cameroon. The Bakwiri, also of Cameroon, call them Mengu, singular Lingu. And the Subu people of Cameroon traditionally believe in a singular god named Jengu. I'm going to call them Miengu for the video because that seems to be the most common and well-known name. What all of these myths have in common is the descriptions of their merfolk and their abilities. They are beautiful, which is a super common mermaid trait. They have long hair that one source used the somewhat dated term woolly to describe. Now I suppose this could mean that Miengu literally have hair like sheep or something, but I suspect they mean that the hair has a texture similar to Africans. This makes sense as merbeings and fairies in general tend to resemble the ethnic groups of the people telling their myths. So I wouldn't use that term, but I think it's likely that the Miengu have curly, textured hair. They also have gap-toothed smiles, which is a really unique detail. And all sources describe them as mermaid-like, which likely means that they have fishtails. Pretty much every culture on Earth has a fishtail-bottomed humanoid upper-body water spirit, so this tracks. In Africa alone, we have the Nomo, Onegegi, Zen, Sembi, probably Mamiwata, and Mambamutu, kind of. They're freaky looking. Last month's water people are shapeshifters with snake associations who could potentially have fishtails. The sand people's tailed men, the Kwakwet, I'm not sure if that pronunciation is correct, in South Africa also seem to have fishtails. Cave art on screen. Lastly, Angola's Kianda is half woman, half fish, so I think it's clear that the Miengu have human upper bodies and fish lower bodies. Also of note is the sea god Jingu, who has backwards pointing feet. Not only do backwards pointing feet appear in mythology globally, but specific to water spirits, the Matabele of Côte d'Ivoire, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Ghana have backwards pointing feet. Miengu live in the Atlantic Ocean, as well as Cameroon's rivers. Miengu are worshipped because it is believed that they control the supply of fish and the health and safety of all in their waters. In some traditions, they can cure diseases. This is similar to Zimbabwe's Njuzu, who teach people to become healers. This is reflective of water's danger as well as its life-giving qualities. These beliefs are not only common in African merfolk myths, but in merfolk myths around the world. It's also common for ancient peoples to ascribe power and meaning to natural forces and animals that they live in close proximity with. For Cameroon's indigenous peoples making their living from the water, it makes sense that they would have myths and rituals designed to ensure that they had a bountiful supply of fish. Miengu worship, cults, and coming-of-age rituals are all a part of Miengu's mythology. In the cold open of the video, I dramatized a Bakwiri initiation ritual called Lingu La Mangbango, a year-long process that initiates girls into a Lingu cult. It involves enacting a ritualistic kidnapping by a Lingu. The girl is quote-unquote rescued when her female relatives call her back, speaking in the Lingu language. This tantalizing reference to a Lingu language reminds me of the secret language that Dogon young men speak during Sigwai, a ritual that honors the Nomo. Is this a merfolk language? The biggest Miengu ceremony today is the annual Ngando celebration in Douala on the estuary of the Wari River in Cameroon. Miengu belief centers around the Wari River, which is 100 meters at its deepest point. This is fairly deep. For context, the deepest river in the world is the Congo River at 220 meters deep. Ngando means umbilical cord, which symbolizes the bond between the Douala people and justice, but it also makes me think of the water world of the womb that we are all attached to with an umbilical cord before birth. During the ceremony, the Jingu cult sacrifices to the Miengu at Lijibale on the Wari. Lastly, one cult member dives into the water with a gift for the Miengu and stays below the water as long as possible. Afterward, the cult member returns with a message from the Miengu about the year to come. The Miengu are also described as water oracles. So what does all of this tell us about the Miengu? They have human upper bodies, fishtails, likely strongly resemble Cameron's native people, have gap-toothed smiles, and may have supernatural powers over fish, water, fertility, disease, and healing, as well as being able to foretell the future. They have their own language, which humans can learn, and they are able to communicate with humans. There's also a fascinating story of Miengu-human interbreeding. A Jingu named Gibelay had children with a human man from Li Gibelay. She gives the island its name. It's literally the island of Gibelay. The people of the island are said to be her descendants. There's also a connection between the Miengu and the human dead of the island. Ancestors are venerated and are in some way a part of the water. They are called water ancestors, or those who are lying down. These beliefs are still very much alive on the island. A 2024 documentary that I linked depicts this vibrant culture and living traditions. It's not my intention with this video to disrespect the beliefs of the people of Li Gibelay, just to explore them in the context of broader merfolk traditions and fairy faith. Merfolk interbreeding with humans is fairly common. It's part of the Nomos story. The first Onegegi was married to a merman, and Ekaniba was abducted by the water people for marriage and was later transformed into a water spirit herself. This suggests genetic compatibility. Are they a race closely related to humans? Are they aliens? Is genetic engineering involved? Or is it all just a legend? Who can say? For fun though, let's imagine the possible biology of the Miengu. They are human-sized, ranging from 5 foot to over 6 feet tall, but most fall into the average height range for humans. We know this because all the sources make it clear that they look like and are the same size as humans. I know they have long hair, so I depicted my Jingu with thick black quote-unquote hair made of hairy frogfish-like spindles. She has brown skin, which increases her resemblance to a human African woman. I wondered if there were marine animals with brown skin and found Cuvier's beaked whales, so although they don't live in Cameroon, this was my inspiration for the Jingu's skin. Although I'm trying to make her look beautiful and humanoid, she also lives deep underwater, so I gave her the big black eyes of my other mermaid drawings. She has no nose and breathes through both gills and lungfish-like lungs. Lungfish are incredible fish that have both gills and lungs and can breathe both air and water. But what about that gap-toothed smile? Look at these otters' teeth. If you can't see the smaller teeth between the big canines, it might look gap-toothed. There are more reasons why otters might be a good source of inspiration that I will get into further on in the video. Refocusing on Jingu. Their diet is unknown, but they're probably omnivores, or carnivores, as they're given sacrifices and food offerings. Otter teeth suggest they could be carnivores, much like last month's water people with their sharp teeth. She has no outer ears, but can hear in water and on the surface in order to communicate with humans. I made my Jingu female. What myths we do have suggest that they have two sexes and that females have humanoid breasts, so I've chosen to depict that here. She also has human arms, which I assume Miengu have, as they're said to have human upper halves. Also, so far, all African merfolk have had human arms, except for Mamamutu's lobster arms and the Nomos' squiggly lungfish arms. Their hands are very humanoid and not webbed, just like the Congo clawless otters, whose front limbs are not webbed, and have fingers enabling them to open shells. Although I know Miengu have fishtails, I could not find any descriptions of said tails. However, so continuing with the otter inspiration, I gave her a sleek brown tail inspired by Congo clawless otter tails. Her pose is looking and reaching upward toward a human supplicant whom she will tell the future to. We know from the story of Li Gibelay that Miengu can interbreed with humans, so they likely have to shapeshift in order for that to be possible. And this is just semi-informed speculation on my part, but in human form, they might have backwards pointing feet. Alternatively, backwards pointing feet could be related to otter-like fins, as I suggested in my Matabele video. Perhaps their humanoid upper forms have flexible flipper-like feet so that they seem to point backwards. The otter inspo and compatibility with humans raises the obvious question of whether or not Miengu are mammals, similar to my speculative biology versions of Matabele and Inadaha/Woad Uma. They could be mammals, although that creates the issue of needing to come to the surface for air, which perhaps in some remote area they still live and come to the surface in secret. Alternatively, they are now extinct. Or, despite their visual similarity to otters, they are still actually fish, as I have previously supposed. There are animals in the real world that resemble other animals that they actually have very little relationship to, like mantid flies who look like wasps, or pillbugs who aren't actually bugs but are terrestrial crustaceans. And to further support my point that nature is weird, pillbugs carry their young in pouches marsupial style, despite not being marsupials. So to make a long-winded point, Miengu could be fish and still have a strong resemblance to otters. And that's what I'm going with here. I think it more closely resembles the myth where Miengu tend to stay below the water, as in the water oracle ritual. Additionally, every other human upper body, fish lower body mer being we've covered so far has been a fish, so I think it makes sense for the Miengu to be fish as well. And this is probably as good a place as any to include my scientific classification. As you might expect, they are closely related to the Simbi, water people, Onegegi/Zin, Nomo, and Mamiwata/Papiwata, and more distantly related to Mambamutu. The exact classification is that they are in class Amphibia, like all fish, but are in my made-up order Homo ichthys, meaning manfish, suborder Newman, and family Fluviatili, both referring to their lungs. This is where Miengu differ from Mambamutu, who can't breathe air at all and so are in suborder Branchia. I put Miengu in the genus Atlanticus with the Simbi because both species can travel between salt and fresh water. The species name I chose is Atlanticus jingu, and I suspect when I profile Kianda in a couple months, they will be here as well. Now let's move into the really wacky stuff, their alleged powers and language. Then I will create a possible life cycle for Atlanticus jingu. It's said that Miengu control the fertility of marine life, water itself, can heal people, protect them from disease, and even tell the future. There's, I think, 3 ways to approach this: rational, scientific, and mystical. The rational explanation is that ancient people without access to modern science, but wanting to feel like they could do things to ensure that they would have enough fish to eat, not die in the water, survive illnesses, and know the future, all things people still want today, created rituals and mythologized Atlanticus jingu, when in reality they had no special powers to protect the people of Cameroon. In the scientific explanation, these powers come from technology. Advanced knowledge of fish farming and biology could look like control over fish. Diving gear, medical treatment for drowning, medicines and vaccines could explain control over water, disease, and healing. To go a little sci-fi, weather manipulation technology can make water calmer or prevent storms. Telling the future could be meteorology and predictions about the health of fish or rivers coming from scientific knowledge. The last explanation is mystical or just plain unexplainable. They have supernatural powers or advanced tech beyond current human understanding. Maybe they are aliens, time travelers, other dimensional beings, or Nephilim. No one knows, and that's part of what makes this stuff so fascinating. What are the lives of these mysterious creatures like? We know that they live in both Cameroon's rivers and the Atlantic Ocean. The Wari River specifically flows out into the Atlantic Ocean. Their life cycle probably involves travel between fresh and salt water. Some animals, such as salmon and eels, have complex life cycles that involve living in both fresh and salt water. There are 2 ways to approach this. They could be born in fresh water and then travel to the ocean. That's anadromous. Or born in the ocean and then travel into the rivers. That's catadromous. Salmon, smelt, and some types of bass are anadromous. Eels are catadromous. Because only adults are described in the myths, they might be catadromous, born in the ocean, explain why juveniles are never seen, and travel up the rivers where they interact with the native peoples. This was the theory I had in my Enadaha/Woadaluma video. Alternatively, they could be born in Cameroon's rivers and travel to the Atlantic Ocean as adults. This was the theory I put forth in my Simbi video. Part of my reason for that was because of the possibility that the Simbi could grow to very large sizes. That is not present in Miengu legend, so I think catadromous is more likely. Whether life begins in the ocean or a river, young called fry are born, likely in large groups. Do they live like fish or in a more advanced alien civilization? Who knows? The myth tells us that the Miengu are intelligent, powerful, and have their own language. Atlanticus jingu fry are nursed by their mothers with a milk-like substance that the mothers secrete, much like the discus fish. This is probably why they have primate-like breasts. Like all fish, they can swim immediately after birth, and they breathe through external gills at first, until their lungs develop. By adulthood, their lungs have developed, enabling them to come to the surface. This is probably the age when they are able to shapeshift into a human or humanoid form as well. They probably have human lifespans. The lungfish that I've drawn so much inspiration from can live up to 77 years in the wild. Lastly, I want to speculate on whether or not Atlanticus jingu's distribution overlaps with Atlanticus simbi and Africanus wada. Mami wada definitely overlaps with Miengu mythology. Simbi does as well, and it's worth asking if these are all the same beings, just called different names to the same creature. Cheetahpo from Zambia might also be the same being, and maybe even Onegegi and Zin in North and Central Africa. It's possible that there are only 4 mer beings in Africa so far: the Nomo, Africanus Nomo, the Water People, Africanus Drum, Mambamutu, Homo sectus, and a 4th mer being that inspired the myths of Mami Wada, Simbis, Onegegi, Zin, Miengu, and possibly Cheetahpo. The variations in color appearance could all fall within the normal range of variation within a species. But if they are separate species though, that isn't necessarily a problem. Think of how many sharks and whales share the same space. Atlanticus simbi are crepuscular, so they are primarily active at dawn and dusk. So that takes care of part of that problem. Africanus wada and Atlanticus jingu have the most potential overlap and could even potentially interbreed. That's part of what's so interesting about gathering all these myths into one place. I can see where they overlap. When I finish doing my African merfolk videos, I will release a map with all of them on it so that you can see where they all live. Speaking of future plans, I have finally set up my Tumblr. It has all of my list of fairies organized by category and continent. I'm always updating it. I hope that it will be the most comprehensive fairy list on the internet. My categories are animal fairies, fairies that look exactly like or very similar to real animals, however they have supernatural traits, plant fairies, part plant, and or have their life force tied to a plant, heavenly fairies associated with the heavens, the sky, and or outer space, monstrous fairies who have features that many cultures associate with monsters and demons, such as fangs, horns, or bat wings, ghostly fairies who are associated with death and may not have a set physical appearance, some appear as orbs of light, and animal hybrid fairies who appear primarily humanoid but have some animal traits such as horns, wings, or fishtails. Subcategories: avian, hooved, reptilian, insect, ursine, canine, primate, pygmy, simian, freshwater, furred freshwater, and merfolk. My continent categories are Africa, Asia, including Turkey, because I felt that Turkish mythology was more closely related to Asia than Europe, and some indigenous Russian cultures. Australia and Oceania are grouped together, Europe, and lastly the Americas, excluding Hawaii, which is included in Australia and Oceania, and the Caribbean. I grouped the Americas together because many tribes cross modern-day borders, so it didn't make sense for me to split it up into North, Central, and South America. I will also eventually be adding Antarctic cryptids into the continent groupings based on what continent the cryptid is closest to. For example, Kabagan is a cryptid first spied by the crew of the Japanese fishing ship 28th Kan Piramaru near Antarctica, which I've included in the Asia category. This is partly because of Kabagan's similarity to the yokai Umibozu. I'm still trying to figure out how to categorize aliens like Greys, who appear all around the world. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Join me next month to learn about the merfolk that may have inspired these mysterious South African cave paintings. Do they depict merfolk? We'll find out.